Welcome, welcome, welcome. I got to say welcome 3 times because it takes a few seconds to like kick off the live stream. So, you want to get it at the beginning of welcome. So I say 3 times, gives me a buffer. Hi, welcome to Life Giving Leaders. I'm Michael. This is the lovely Dana Hannah. And we are husband and wife. We are also co-founders of Hannah Strategy and the hosts of Life Giving Leaders. Every Wednesday, 12 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Pacific. We are live for half an hour, and we are talking about different topics to help leaders make a greater impact in a way that gives life to their teams and their stakeholders. And today, we are going to be talking about adapting to the changes in season that we experience. We understand that life operates in seasons. We have seasons in our individual lives. Our corporations have seasons. Our teams have seasons. Now, what do I mean by a season? Is that when a season changes, a season is something that has a beginning and it has an end, which implies a season's going to change. You're going to go from season A to season B. And when a season changes, it matters because it requires from us an adjustment or a way that we adapt to the change in seasons. And so if we don't adjust to a change in season, then we start to experience in our lives or in our business, we start to experience challenges. Not only do we experience challenges, we experience preventable challenges. Why are they preventable? Because all we have to do is adapt. All we have to do is adapt. So simple, right? Well, how do you discern when there's a change in season? How do you recognize what that season requires? And when I talk about a change in season, I mean what change shows up in one of 2 ways: something to let go of, something to hold on to. I guess you could say there's a third way, which is maybe adjusting how we manage the thing that we have, right? But what we're going to focus on today is really how to let go and how to discern what to let go of in order to create capacity for the season that we have entered into, or maybe even preparing for the season that is coming up. This is so, so important. In corporations, oftentimes what will happen is a season will change, but if the leadership team in that company does not declare the change in season, hey team, we're in a different season now. Such and such has changed. As a result, this is how we're going to operate differently. It may be maybe we've broken through to a new level of growth and we're now going to disseminate decision-making authority in a different way. Maybe they just got a major round of funding and we're going to go into, you're going to start seeing a lot of new faces in this company as we hire more people or whatever it is, but declaring the change. When a company doesn't declare the change in season and declare how we're going to adjust how we operate as a result, what tends to happen is you get symptoms that look like suddenly dissatisfaction is increasing. Symptoms like people are saying what was working this time last year, it doesn't seem to be working as well now. Things feel like they're starting to take longer. We start to feel like there's red tape. Why? Because we haven't adjusted our processes to the change in season. And so it's important both in corporate settings as well as individuals that we recognize our change in seasons. And we're going to focus a little bit on the individual change. How do I look in the mirror and recognize something has changed in my life, and what do I do about it? How do I adapt to the change?
Yeah, I was in thinking about this. I've really been thinking about how resentment, because you talked about for changes in seasons, you need to be able to release.
Yes.
And when there's underlying resentment is a
What
gripping.
do I do about it? How do I adapt to change?
Is a gripping like to the past, is a gripping to a previous season. It could be the season you're in, or it could be residue even from seasons before the season you're in. So maybe you didn't even fully transition into this season, and something is always kind of feeling off in your leadership or in your serving, and you don't understand why. And a lot of times that's resentment. And there's a lot of leadership dynamics and team dynamics that can play into this. So I'm going to go through a few definitions and how things play into each other. we spoke about shame, and Brene Brown's definition of shame is the fear that you're not good enough for connection, right? The fear that you're not good enough for connection. Now, resentment. What is resentment? Resentment is something that happens when you look at somebody and you feel they're doing something you're not allowed to do. So, for example, if the dynamics in a relationship are such that you feel that the other person takes liberties that you yourself feel unable to take, you don't feel you have the freedom. You might not want to take those liberties because they might go against your values, but just the aspect that you're seeing someone else behave in a way that you feel not allowed to behave in, if you don't catch that, that just piles up resentment. Like that is where resentment comes from. Now, what does shame have to do with resentment? A lot of the times we don't live in freedom because of our shame. We feel we're not worthy of connection with others, so we put people-pleasing limitations on ourselves. And others in our environment don't have those same limitations, and we see them acting in a way that we have told ourselves we can't behave. We can build resentment up to them for them. We're not even realizing. And this happens a lot in the workplace and in workplace dynamics and in, a dynamics where one person's the authority and one person is the team member, or maybe even two team members together. And it's an interesting thing because it also plays into some of our natural design. So if we're someone who's maybe very emotionally intelligent, very compassionate, very our tendencies when we're not functioning at our best could be to be prey. And if we're somebody who's, very much a visionary, very vocal, our tendencies in our weakness would be to prey on the people who have that other tendency. And on both sides of the equation, this is coming out of shame. So when we're talking about life-giving leadership, we need to recognize and own our own shame and not blame other people, and own our own resentment and release it and move past it so we can go into new seasons. But we also need to own if we're creating that in others around us, because that would come out of our own shame too. And how do we even know if we're creating that? If you see that people are resentful towards you, if you hear if someone said to you, you're gaslighting, and you don't actually know what that means or why they're saying that, that could be an indicator. Not necessarily, that could also be their own things, but these are some of the clues we can look for to say, okay, do I need to dig into this shame, resentment type dynamic?
Well, this is really interesting. So let me just pull something out of what you said here. So depending on a person's natural design, a byproduct of the shame that they feel or experience can look like kind of predatory tendencies, or it can look like subjecting myself as a victim to someone else's predatory tendencies. And in both cases, it's rooted in shame, but it just shows up in such radically different ways. So it's so interesting. I just want to draw the kind of direct connection here with we're talking about how you adapt to changing seasons. And we're saying one of the critical things when there's a change in our season is to let go of the things of the previous season in order to create capacity for the future season. So this is where this aspect of resentment and shame comes in, because look, whatever that last season it was, whether it's a change in jobs or whether it's just a different circumstance within the workplace, whatever it is, chances are there is something to let go of. Chances are you had opportunity to feel resentment. You had opportunity to look at somebody else and think, how come, hey, wait, I work twice as hard as that person. How come I'm not seeing that? Or maybe even it's, ooh, I'm not willing to manipulate the way they were manipulating, and so I'm getting the shorter end of the stick, or whatever it is. But it's this aspect of freedom that you talk about.
Right. And it can actually come up in simpler, more daily activities that you might miss, because when you miss it and it's building up over time, it's this underlying floor that's holding you in a previous season and you don't. What do I mean? Something as simple as you're sitting in a meeting and someone says something and you're like, oh, I could never say that. I wouldn't be praised for saying that. I would be punished for saying that, but they're being praised for saying that. Do you know what I mean? Or you say something and then someone else says it, and it's not heard when you say it, but it's heard when you don't deal with these little things, they can create this almost invisible to you bed of resentment. And you might not even recognize it, but when it's time to shift seasons, you can't wholeheartedly give yourself to that present moment where you are and where you're called to bring impact and where you're called to connect and make that difference.
So how do you do that? I mean, how do I navigate the kind of fine line between not even acknowledging that there's a problem, but then if I acknowledge it, I'm going to feel this resentment. What do I do when I recognize in that moment when it's still just a little seed of resentment, that I'm just starting to feel little elements of it? You know, if I just leave it and these layers of resentment start to pile on, that's when it starts to have a restrictive effect on my ability to perform, to change seasons, to operate in the freedom that I have. But what do I do when I identify, recognize, like, oh, something's off in here? I'm not talking about, okay, they did something wrong, fine, but what's going on in here?
Right.
That's my business. That's my responsibility. I recognize it. What do I do with it?
Well, first step is forgiving them, even if they didn't actually do something wrong. The fact that you're holding that, the way to release that externally is to forgive them. And you can literally just get by yourself and say, I forgive this person for doing this, even if they didn't do anything wrong, but because it made me feel like this. And I still choose to bless them and want the best for them. I choose to desire the best for them and not now desire that I would be above them in any way. So forgiveness is the first step, because resentment and bitterness are very, like, they're family, right? So you want to get rid of that. Then the second step is to own your own shame cycles. Like, okay, this is coming from me. And actually the reality is, when you are in those shame cycles, you will keep creating those same dynamics in your life. So if you're the one being preyed on, not dealing with your own shame will cause you to continually find yourself in the same dynamic again and again and again, place after place after place. And again, it can be also connected to your design, but you're free from it when you are free from shame, when you're dealing with your own things. And in the dealing with the shame, I mean, for those of you who listen to us often, it might sound like a broken record, but it is an aspect of doing one of our 9-week processes, doing one of Dr. Carolyn Leaf's 63-day cycles, or Dr. Ed's 40 days, but actually like processing, getting it out. We talked about different ways you can get it out last week: journaling, writing songs to get it out, but a systematic process to remove it from yourself completely and recognize it and replace it with a confidence that you are worthy of connection and an ability to be vulnerable, because that's actually the opposite, is the ability to be vulnerable because you know you're worthy of connection, which that's Brené Brown.
Really good. So this is one of the ways of letting go, is recognizing resentment, processing it, forgiving, and releasing. And what does that do? It creates capacity in our hearts, in our minds. It actually opens up our creativity as well. Resentment hinders creative thinking. I will repeat that. Resentment hinders creative thinking, creative problem solving, creative connection with others. Let's go back to changing seasons here, because I want to make sure we understand, how do we recognize that there's been a shift? How do we recognize that something warrants an adjustment in how we operate? And when I talk about how we operate, I'm talking about my rhythms, my habits, maybe what I'm reading and watching, the key relationships that are focal in my life at that moment. I mean, there are always on relationships like our spouse or our kids or God, but then there are relationships, sometimes in the social and in the career sectors, where a change in season is like, hey, I need to pay a little more attention and invest in certain relationships. But how do I recognize that a season has changed? One of the key things we want to look for is patterns, a change in patterns. Sometimes there is one big fell circumstantial change that drives the change in season. That's true. For example, maybe you're renting and then you buy a house. Yeah, change in season. You graduate university, you start your career or whatever. You start a business. That's a clear and obvious change in season. But a lot of times, without you deciding to change a season has changed on you. How do I recognize it? I look for patterns. And there are two areas where I can look for patterns changing. Number one, circumstantial patterns. Okay, so external factors like a seasonal change shows up as a change in weather, a change in temperature, a change in the nature of the precipitation that we're experiencing. So you look at circumstances that are changing around you. An example might be a greater demand on your time in certain ways, maybe a greater demand on your finances or other types of resources. Maybe you're noticing an influx in people reaching out to you for help in a certain way. These are external factors that are patterned indicators that a season has changed. The other thing that you can explore is patterns internally, thought patterns, emotional patterns, spiritual patterns, things that once were satisfying are not satisfying anymore, things that there's something inside of you is saying, I need more, or something has to change, or things that felt right before don't feel right anymore. Something feels off. There's something going on in here where you're starting to see patterns internally in your inner experience. Both of those external patterns and internal patterns are likely indicators that a season has changed. And when you recognize a season has changed, it deserves attention. It deserves a time to sit down and prayerfully and mindfully, and sometimes maybe even with somebody else that you know and trust, if it's helpful, pause and ask yourself these questions. What are the indicators that I'm noticing that something has changed? Okay. What is changing? What is required of me to adjust to this change? Okay. What is true in my life right now that wasn't true this time last year, or whatever time period is appropriate to your questioning? Okay. What do I need to let go of right now? Because it was appropriate to the previous season, but it is not appropriate to the season that I'm now newly in. I'll say again, what do I need to let go of? This is key. What I'm letting go of isn't necessarily just bad things.
Right.
Okay. So letting go of resentment is not a seasonal thing. You should always let go of resentment. There is no season when resentment is appropriate. However, it's often a seasonal change that will highlight the fact that the resentment is there. But the question that I'm asking here is a slightly different question. It's what was good and appropriate last season, but is no longer useful and appropriate this season. That's the spirit of this question.
Right. And even what's good, and it's not even always about if it's useful, but it's an aspect of release, right? Like the last house we had was right on the water. Ridiculous view. We were able to fish in the backyard.
I gotta let it go. I gotta let it
right,
go.
Because if we're in our current house, always thinking about what it doesn't have, that the last house had, we'll never enjoy what this house has, or this community brings, or this neighbor. You know what I mean? So it's even the good things. It's like I'm thankful for that, and that's in the past, and this is a new season, and there's things to be thankful for and to be present with and enjoy, because you have to remember the only place you can affect change is the present. Right? You can't change what was past. You can decide what you're going to do in this moment with everything in and you have power in this moment. But if you're stuck in a previous season, you give away your power for today. And your power to connect, your power to be present, your power to enjoy, your power to affect change. So I wanted to actually go back to something I had said. I sort of rattled a few things off as if everyone listening is our audience, but you're not. So you might not know what I had been referring to. when we're talking about breaking the shame cycles, I referenced three things. I referenced our 9-week process, which is a chapter within our Defining Your Next Chapter with Clarity and Confidence course. Actually, another chapter in that course is about seasons and about building the ecosystems, the rhythms, the structures in your life to be the most powerful in your present season. And there's another chapter about understanding your design and your true north. So all of that can be found in our Defining Your Next Chapter with Clarity and Confidence course. So that was one thing I mentioned in terms of breaking the shame cycle and shifting into a new season. I also mentioned Dr. Caroline Leaf's 63-day cycle. There's books upon it. There's the best way to do it. Go to her Neurocycle app, download it and subscribe. It's worth the subscription. And the third thing I mentioned was Dr. Ed. It's Dr. Ed Silvoso. And it's a 40-day treatment called a Strongholds treatment. And there's a $5 book you can buy on Amazon that will lead you through it.
And this 9-week process that you reference, I love it because what it does is it takes the Ed Silvoso's 40-day strongholds, which deals at a spiritual level, and it takes Dr. Caroline Leaf's practices, which deals at a neurological level, and it takes the envisioning of the future, which you have by inspiration, and just kind of, it's a holistic approach, because a lot of times what we're doing is we're working on our mindset, for example, or our belief system, but we're not dealing with maybe spiritual elements. So we're checking one box, nothing's changed. Well, maybe you checked that box well, there's just another box to be checked, or vice versa.
Right.
The other question to ask yourself when you're recognizing, when you've discerned a season has changed, I said, what do I need to let go of that was appropriate in the previous season, but no longer in this season? There's then the opposite question. Remember, we're letting go to create capacity. Create capacity for what? To be able to hold on to the new thing that's required in this season. So the next question you need to ask yourself is, what do I need to give more attention to in this season? What do I need to prioritize in this season that I needed to deprioritize in a previous season? What newly deserves my special attention? And that is the power of discerning the season. The power of discerning your season enables you to determine your priorities for this season. And determining your priorities is key, because when you know your priorities, you're not trying to do everything at once. You're not burning yourself out. And you're able, after consciously making that decision, you're able to communicate expectations to others.
Yes. Now, this is a section of the course that you created, and obviously we're not going into the depth of the material that we have gone with our students, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what we can learn from the Defining Your Next Chapter and Clarity and Confidence course about seasons, and how, if we're interested in that, how do we connect with that?
Yeah, good. Really good. I mean, this program that we created, it's a group coaching program, and it was birthed out of an observation that people are navigating transition, and that they are struggling sometimes to even recognize how to navigate it. And when I say navigating a transition, it shows up in one of two ways: either a change that happened to you, but you did not choose, or the other kind is people who feel like, something's got to change, but I don't know specifically what. And a lot of the content hinges on this understanding of seasons. And in the program, we actually go through different types of seasons and how to discern the type of season that it's in, and what each type of season requires from us in terms of what's happening both circumstantially as well as internally. And if you're interested in learning more, you can connect with us. Simply book a free conversation. And all you have to do in order to do that is go to hannahstrategy.com. The link is also in the description. Go to hannahstrategy.com and click Let's Chat. If you want more details about the actual program outline, you can also, that link is also in the description, or you can go to hannahstrategy.com/next. And we'd be happy to chat with you, learn a little bit more about what's going on in your world, and give you an opportunity to ask any questions you want about the program. But we've seen amazing testimonies of folks that have come through this program. Some have started new businesses. Some have made no change and just discerned that what needs to change is internally. Some have gotten promotions. Some have just some have gained greater confidence and clarity in how they're already operating.
Yes. I'm seeing comment in the comments here from Jim Chester. And, you know, when you're making a huge transition like that, you know, somewhere you've been 30 years and there are so much emotions. And I think gratefulness is a really good way. And just allowing yourself to process all the events, all the situations. We actually do have we do have one of the processes in the course that actually, like, how do you walk through the various stages? We actually use your resume as an outline, you know, of different things and process what was good, what was not good. Let me feel the emotions. Let me be grateful for what I'm taking from this season, and let me learn from, you know, how to build into my next season what didn't work so great in that previous season. It is really important to process and to feel your emotions, and that is a huge part of releasing the previous season and embracing the current season or the coming season, depending on where you are in that transition.
Oh man, I just want to like +1 on this one. Look, gratitude. If you are struggling to accurately discern what is going on, lay the foundation of gratitude. Again, if you are struggling to accurately discern what is going on and what is required of you, lay the foundation of gratitude. It will establish perspective. It will put you in a hopeful frame of mind, and it will put you in a possibility frame of mind, which powers that hope. What do I mean by that? When we are operating in resentment and focused on everything that's wrong and all of the gaps, I mean, there's always something, right? You know, sometimes I'll say to somebody, how's it going? And they'll say, oh, can't complain. And I'll be, well, you can complain. You're just wise enough not to. But the idea here is when we're focusing on the gaps and what's missing and what's still to be accomplished and what we still need to do and what we wish we had, it starts to deplete our sense of hope over time. And also we tend to understate what we do have. It is a glass half full, glass half empty thing. But when we start and say, I may not have a full pencil case, but I have this pen. Thank you, God, for this pen. I will make the most of this pen. And I will use this pen to produce another pen and a pencil. And then I will use the pen and the pencil to produce a pen, pencil, eraser, and sharpener. And then I will use that to build out a whole, and you can see it starts to evolve. But if I don't acknowledge the pen, and all I'm doing is focusing on the lack of a pencil and the lack of an eraser and sharpener, then what happens is I miss the opportunity that's in front of me. Because sometimes opportunity comes by putting to work what's already in your hands. It's not always a net new thing that comes from a third-party space. Like, you know what I'm saying? So if your hope is depleted, if you're feeling disempowered, if you're feeling confused, if you feel like I don't know what to do with what's going on out there or in here, step 1, lay the foundation of gratitude. And it can be as simple as spending some time in the morning and making a list of what you're thankful for and turning it into a 3-minute daily practice.
And the thing with gratitude, so transition is can be pretty anxiety inducing at times. And also when you're kind of looking at seeing if there's shame cycles, seeing in your leadership that, you know, finding out you've been resentful and you didn't realize, that can also be kind of anxiety inducing. And when we talk about gratitude, they've found biologically your brain cannot be grateful and anxious at the same time. Biologically, they've found your brain cannot be grateful and anxious at the same time. So if you feel like if you're going through something that could be anxiety inducing or you're experiencing anxiety, actually choosing to shift into gratefulness. Thinking about a few things you're grateful for, big or small. You might not feel like you have a million big things to be thankful for, especially if you're feeling anxious, but it could be that simple as thank you for this warm cup of coffee.
Mhm.
You know, it's soothing me just that little bit. I just thank you for that. Whatever it is, just think of a few things you're grateful for, and you actually prevent your mind from you push away the anxiousness. Gratefulness biologically pushes out anxiousness from your mind, and you can come out of fight, flight, and freeze and actually be at a place where you're clear and you're aware and you can be present in the moment.
Here, here. Well, we'll close with this thought then. It is always appropriate to be thankful. Those of you who are part of Life Giving Leaders membership, we will see you in the other part of the conversation. If you're curious about how to become a member, just go to hannahstrategy.com/leaders and you can learn more there. Or again, click Let's Chat and we're happy to connect with you. See you on the other side. We will enable